Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Wimbo's F1 podcast, The Battle, episode 3. And today's podcast is Williams themed, as you can tell by my t-shirt, because today, two F1 content creators are going to battle out who's the better driver, Alex Albon or Carlos Sainz. Now, to defend Carlos Sainz, I've found Law VS, who has done a bunch of videos about the Carlos Sainz revenge arc. Welcome, Law. And to defend Alex Albon, I found the biggest Alex Albon fan on YouTube. And we all know him, it's Tomo. Hello, gentlemen.
I'm here to represent my duty as an Alex Albon fan and to put Carlos Sainz and Law VS in their respective places. That's my job today.
Okay.
And Law, how's it going on your end?
Going good. It was nice to see another double points finish for Williams, and I think if all goes well and they can score at least 7 points this weekend, then they could stand to have gotten as many points as 22, 23, and 24 combined. That's
very
pretty
nice.
Nuts. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that should easily be doable with the revenge arc of Carlos Sainz now starting to kick up a gear again.
Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely getting the hang of that car a little bit better.
Especially in qualifying.
Yeah. So the way I've planned this out is going to be 3 chapters. The first one is called The Flex. This is where the two creators get a chance to yap for about 10 minutes or shorter or longer, whatever.
Definitely longer.
To talk about all the things they like about their driver, a bit of their history, what their expectations are of the driver, the qualities. We'll leave the negative things for a later bit of the podcast. So I think we're going to start with Tobo. What do you like about Alex Albon?
It's a good question, Wim, because I've liked Alex ever since he jumped into an F1 car in 2019, and I think there's something about Alex's demeanor, his character, his energy, the kind of human being he seems to be that I'm drawn towards. Right, we all follow our sporting athletes for various different reasons. Some people are attracted to winning and success. Others, people are always up against it. And I feel like you go through Alex's story as well, and there's so many chances where things could have gone wrong, and actually the likelihood, just to get into F1 in the first place, let alone still being on the grid in 25 and putting in the kind of performances he has, because Alex had a pretty stellar junior career. Lando talks about how he had posters of Alex Albon on his wall, and at that part of his fledgling career at the time, things were looking up, and he got that Red Bull kind of contract secured very early on. I think it was 2015, I want to say, and then they dropped him at the end of the very same year. So he had kind of a very fleeting experience with Red Bull, and that could have derailed his career entirely. And certainly, it helped having a dad's Nigel Albon, who was an ex-racer himself, but not anywhere near the levels that Alex has been able to get to. And then you look at, that F2 season alongside George and Lando, Alex, held himself very well, was only a few points shy, I think it was, in the end of Lando Norris. And even the year before that, there's that, I don't know if, lads, you remember that Charles Leclerc, Alex Albon at Abu Dhabi, going down the straight and Charles giving him no room. And it's like, it's proper. It's absolute balls to the wall. Love it racing. But, Alex had his moments throughout as well. There's a damaged chassis you got. I know he had an accident, sorry. And that kind of derailed part of his first F2 year. He's had a lot of setbacks, and obviously the Formula E contract was done, signed, sealed to race at Edams alongside Buemi, who's another ex-Red Bull guy. And then just the Daniel Ricciardo butterfly effect of his move to Renault means an opportunity opens up an opportunity. K-Mag was approached for that opportunity. He said no, he didn't want to race at a Toro Rosso. Who knows where K-Mag's career would be now if he'd have taken that Toro Rosso seat for 2019. But Albon got the call up, and I think through all metrics matched Kvyat in their 12 races as teammates, and he finds himself in a Red Bull. That's crazy. Like, to find yourself in a Red Bull seat, especially at the time in 2019, it wasn't the car that it is now, but it was a top 3 car. The Red Bull at the time, Max was proving it, and for Alex to be in this seat, and actually the gap to Max was big in qualifying. Don't get me wrong, in 2019, but in terms of race performances, that move he put on Vettel around the outside will always have a place in my heart, I've got to say. Great 2019. Is Rookie of the Year that year, ahead of Norris, ahead of Russell. Really strong start to the season. And then 2020, just bang, down to earth. We all know about how that went and how it's been since with the Red Bull Juniors. And I think just the way Alex has been able to continually bounce back, he played his cards. He was considering an IndyCar seat for 2022, sat on the sidelines in 21, helping Red Bull's title bids, which of course Max won in the end, and found himself back at a Williams team that George had done a good job at holding up, but really was still struggling, still needing that Latifi money to keep the lights on at Grove, and to see where the team has gotten to and how he's grown with the team as well, because you can only beat who's ahead of you, and he's not had established teammates in Sargent and Latifi. He's demolished them, but it's only Sargent and Latifi, right? And so how much has he been able to? He hasn't been able to prove. And now going into this year with Sainz, who's king of adaptability, he's been around for a very long time, and the way he held himself against Charles Leclerc, incredible. And so many people, and understandably so. I get it. I get why people thought Sainz would come in and do a job on Alex from day dot. That hasn't happened. Carlos is absolutely getting there, but Alex has held his own, not just relative to his teammate, but relative to the rest of the field as well, and proven that there were so many chances that his career could have derailed, and it did derail in moments, but he found a way to get it back on the line, to keep going along, and now his stock is higher than ever. And it's that story. I think that's what I'm attracted to. Ultimately, the peaks, the troughs have really been there. So it means when the peaks do come, they hit ever so sweet. And that's why I endorse Alex Albon. I think that was that 10 minutes, or it might have been more. I know, actually, that's less than 10 minutes. But you know what? I'm happy with that, lads. I'm happy.
Yeah, but I've got more questions.
Go on then.
I'm sure you've wondered, I have, what would have happened if he stayed in the Red Bull seat for 2021? Because I've heard that he's done a stellar job in the simulator on the RB16B. He's helped Max a lot with that championship. And it was also a much better car than the RB16. So he could have perhaps done a better job than Checo Perez.
Maybe
he wouldn't have brought in the 30 million, and
wouldn't have. That's true.
the commercial side would have been less, but
yeah, I mean, he feels that way. I know there was that interview he did. I think it was a High Performance Podcast interview, and he said, he felt a bit, I don't know what the right word, bitter, a bit frustrated that Perez was reaping the rewards of the work he'd done to make that car more drivable. And because it was, I think even for Max, when you compare 2020 and 2021, the fact that Max was able to, that wasn't only because of the Mercedes floor changes. Red Bull really did make that car more drivable for both drivers. And I mean, and Perez's time at Red Bull didn't start terribly either. Perez was able to get performance out of that car. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. We'll never know for sure. I do think Perez's experience paid dividends at various points in 2021 where Alex's probably wouldn't have. But I don't know, Law, what do you think?
Well, I certainly do recall that in 2020, I went to Barcelona testing, and I think I even saw Max spinning coming out of turn 5 or something like that. I recall saying the RB16 was quite skittish. So Albon did have a lot of disadvantages in that regard, but he managed to get a podium, and arguably he could have had 2 more to his name had he not had that moment with Lewis twice. So he was denied those moments. And arguably, had he had that at the Styrian Grand Prix, the one that we all famously know, Lando Norris getting his first podium, then those 2 podiums might have been enough to give Albon the extra salvo. But realistically, the fact was, though, is that Checo was being dumped by Papa Stroll, and everyone thought that was the greatest crime of all time. That was like, how could you drop Sergio when he's right at his peak, seemingly? And he just won it in such spectacular fashion. But then Red Bull were just, Christian's just like, can't let him go like that. And
it was the right decision. Like that, it was the only sensible
there wasn't really much
at the
Alex
time.
could do. But you felt like Christian was genuinely wanting him still on the grid. That's why he did that Williams deal. That's why he and George Russell, they were very big factors in getting Albon that seat, even though Toto, I remember, was railing so hard against that move. I recall so many articles going on thinking, Toto was thinking, oh no, he's some kind of Red Bull spy or something like that, trying to get the Mercedes engine secrets or something. I remember all the articles. And I was thinking, what the heck? The only way he would have agreed to that is if Christian completely just was removed himself from the conversation. The only connection to Red Bull he had was the drinks company, and that was it. So, it was a bit of an awkward move to Red Bull, but it did happen. And I recall that there have been various, rumblings about Albon having some sort of condition still that Red Bull can talk to him first or something like that if they wanted him back, which, as we then found out, according to Lawrence Barretto over F1.com, Alex rejected. He was just like, nah, mate, nah. Nothing's changed. As in, he just looked at what was going on at Red Bull. It's like, why would I go back to something I already know is not hospitable for me? And I'm a big fish here. So, it's it was definitely a journey for Alex, but he seems to have kicked on now.
It was definitely a good call from him to not do that. And I sort of appreciate that he's always been polite and friendly and nice, and because if he would have become a nuisance to Red Bull when he was being a reserve driver, then they wouldn't have helped him. So when we're talking about his personality, his kindness has saved him in that regard.
Yeah, he felt like Christian was going arm around the way and say, "Oh, don't worry, Alex, we'll make it work." And genuinely sorry for him.
I think it's an underrated character trait, not just the way Alex is, because he clearly does. Even though he can be a bit sassy on the radio, you know what I mean? He clearly does evoke a lot of support from the team internally. But in the same way, you hear the stories about how Max is super down to earth with the team. He's just one of the team. He doesn't put himself on that. He doesn't separate himself. It can come in various forms, but I think it's always going to be in your favor if you can garner support from your team internally, because sometimes you need to, I always think about 2007 at McLaren, where Alonso was buying all his team stuff to try and make sure that they're on side, and you get that insecurity sometimes. And I just think Alex, the way he's carried himself, and he will always have, the senior. I think James Vowles has got his back because he's seen how Alex has bought into this journey, and it had to kind of go both ways, because as much as Williams gave him that lifeline, also Alex has impressed generally. And I know again Latifi and Sargent aren't great yardsticks, but Alex could have like you said, Law, that Red Bull, maybe that was a thing, and maybe he could have taken that, but he chose not to. I'm going to bank on this project, and I feel wanted at this organization, and I think it's come through in the quality of the performances he's put out and the trajectory. Because we say about he helped develop that Red Bull car during the 2021 season and the work on the simulator that he did. And you look at the Williams car trajectory, I think clearly Alex's feedback and his ability to, push a car development forward. From the experience that the evidence that we've seen, it feels like that is a pretty impressive string to his bow as well, which is always going to help his long-term ambitions to stay in this sport.
Yeah. And I did a bit of research before we started. He keeps scoring 90% of the team's points every season. If Williams scored 12 points, he scored 11. And one season he scored 29 out of 30 with Logan Sargent scoring the 1 point. And this season he scored 40 points and I think Carlos Sainz 11. So, those statistics are still going, although it's only race 7 now. But
Well, yeah, if you put it in that mind, then his points tally is catching up with the top four teams. As in, he's only 8 points behind Antonelli, and not that far behind Charles, considering.
that's
it's
impressive.
And also I've realized that Alex can get very freaky when he's like, because you hear him about Miami and then San Marino. It's like, oh my god, man, I could see Max and George ahead of me. I could see the podium, and he was apparently licking his lips at the rear of Charles Leclerc. I'm thinking, Alex, you dirty boy. Alex, you dirty boy. I didn't realize you could get frisky when a podium isn't on the offer. And then what was really interesting is that Oscar in the cool-down room was like saying, he was thanking his lucky stars that Alex had to take to the gravel, because he felt like if he actually made the move on Charles, he would have been mugged. Like, that could have been a podium. Like, Oscar had nothing left.
Yeah, this is actually something we need to save for the shade.
Yes, for the shade. Sorry,
2.
I'm giving...
because he is a little impatient. So take a note, and we'll talk about that later. Are you done, Tomo? For now,
yeah, I feel I'm done for now. I've sufficiently cooked. I want to see Law take to the stage. That's what I want.
Go ahead.
Well, but basically, Carlos Sainz. Well, he is the anti-Alonso in that every team he joins, they always fit. They are always better off by the time he leaves. As in, like, he picks the right team at the right time. And it all stems from the Toro Rosso days. The Toro Rosso days, the 2015 lineup of Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz Jr. absolutely stacked, absolutely intense. And that's just the fathers we're talking about here. The fathers, oh my goodness, having those two titans, especially a rally legend who may or may not become the next FIA president, that was an absolute force to be reckoned with. But unfortunately, the scope at Red Bull was very much limited, because the reason why Max went to Toro Rosso was to then eventually get to Red Bull. And I imagine that they were starting to get a little bit antsy as to the progression and the priorities of Verstappen by the time you get to 2017. And then when it was clear that Max and Daniel were like that there was no room in the inn for Carlos, so he had nowhere really to go. But he was still doing really well in regards to, Toro Rosso. But unfortunately, he had to learn through the school of hard knocks, in that he ultimately became a bargaining chip for Christian. As in, like, tell you what, Renault, if you bugger off from our junior team, we can have Carlos. How about that? And then he could start the Honda project, which Pierre Gasly immediately proved in Bahrain 2018 that, that's a good engine. And then McLaren's just like, just like, curse you, Ron Dennis, and your Coke Zero plan. The Coke bottle car, dang it. Oh dear. If only Ron Dennis wasn't so insistent about that. But anyway, Carlos, he did a decent job at Renault, but unfortunately, Daniel Ricciardo struck again with him coming into Renault in one of the most bizarre transfers ever, including Daniel just going, I chose McLaren because the Mercedes engine sounded really cool, all right? As in, he liked the Mercedes engine, and that was one of the main reasons he went to McLaren, not just because they were doing fairly well.
No, but when Daniel went there, they still had the Renault engines.
No, I was talking about in time for 2021.
Oh, okay.
Because
no.
They had the Mercedes engines for 2021, the MCL35M.
Yeah.
So for 2021, no, that's all right. They had the 3-year engine deal, and then Daniel was coming in with the Mercedes iteration of the 35.
Yeah, because I remember being really surprised that Carlos had never driven a Mercedes engine before Williams, because I just assumed that they already had. But they were still running Renault when he was there in 2020.
No, that continuity did serve him well. But what you saw at McLaren was like them taking a chance on him and making him the leader, even though Lando was definitely giving him some considerably. But you just felt like he was paying it forward, and we started to see glimpses of this guy actually having the chops to be able to, help bring McLaren back to where they were. Because 2019 was very much a journey of discovery for that team. Like 2018 was absolute. I mean, I was there. It was absolutely humbling for that team. They couldn't blame Honda anymore. It was the car. they just completely dropped the ball there. And then over the course of those 2 years together with Carl Lando, we got McLaren finding their way again. And, they started to improve, and Carlos's leadership was strong, and the relationship he had with Lando endures to this day. You still see them kicking about. I mean, I see social media video of them going out to dinner in Monaco, them bringing, I think Lando's got like a GT2 RS or something like that, and Carlos brought his Daytona SP3. So, that was kind of cool, but they still hang out. And that endured. That was the McLaren ethos at that time. It was quite fun, easygoing, very forward thinking. And you felt like Carlos was really starting to show what he could actually do. And it helped give him a personality. Even though I remember in 2019, McLaren was still getting there. No one paying any attention to Carlos whatsoever on the screens. As in like, where's Carlos? And then you started to see more of him when he came in for 2021. But that's where he really impressed people, because he was coming in to replace Vettel. And people were thinking, okay, he's coming in. He's going to be a loyal number 2 to Charles Leclerc. And then what does he go and do in his first season? He outscores the Monegasque. He goes and does it. And it's like, oh, okay, he's not a default. He's not a default number 2, as in he's actually quite close. And then you start to see him really flex his muscles, his strategic muscles. I don't know what it is about Spaniard drivers, but they can really think on the fly. You get Fernando Alonso just like coming up with strategies and lamenting things, and then looking at the screens on around the track. And then you get Carlos, of course, pushing back against the Ferrari engineers, stop inventing and stuff like that, which arguably got 2 of his victories, of him just taking the initiative. And you're starting to see this again with Williams, because I recall him saying he almost ignored orders with the pit stops, because he was like, I think the 1 stop's the way to go. And then he was proven right with Albon's times. He was just like, okay, the 2 stop wasn't the way to go. So it is a case of like, this is the kind of thing that he was learning at Ferrari, and occasionally he was able to exhibit, which will really serve him well over at Williams. That's the thing. He's a great leader with a good head on his shoulders, and he's been through the same meat grinder as Albon through the Red Bull Junior program, and being a teammate with Max Verstappen, albeit for a season and a bit right at the beginning of the Dutchman's career. But he probably could see where the trend was going, and was just like, yeah, kind of glad that he wasn't there. Even though there were rumors about him being picked up again by Red Bull. I mean, I was rooting for that. I mean, that would have been absolutely fire. That would have been so intense. Because I think really what we've seen from Max this year is that he is actually calmed down. He is actually handling himself. Because I recall when Lando was smack talking him, and then Max says, Lando's been talking shade about you. Your thoughts, Max? He's like, say what he wants, I don't care. Okay. He just doesn't give it. And it just makes Lando out to be a bit silly. But you feel like, well, if that's the case, if he can actually tone it down, then with Carlos there, I think, they could have actually made it work. But either way, Carlos coming into Williams, this was a huge coup, especially since for months people were thinking it was going to be the Audi deal. And then ultimately he spurned it. And quite frankly, I think that was for the best, because we got Gabi in there, who's no slouch. We got Hulkenberg, who's already proving his worth, with that cheeky 7th place in Australia, and then almost getting points. But I think he only got mugs because they mistimed the safety car or something like that. They got gobbled up and they were in 12th. But that Sauber could score. And Gabi out-qualifying Nico sometimes shows there is some potential in the kid. So they're quite fine there. But with Carlos Williams, it's perfect because it's transformed the team. And within the first act of the season, it's already been proven to be correct. Because you've got these two guys, Alex and Carlos, they're changing, they're stepping up out of the response from the other. And they're able to contribute their own values. And with Carlos, it's a case of just being frank and honest, saying that's not how a winning team should be acting. Because, Alex has been part of the Williams fold for years, but it's not been something that he can really get a good reference point with, because the stuff he learned at Red Bull, that was years ago and not really relevant to his current skill set. And that was one of the things that Toto was saying to Vasseur at Alfa Romeo when he got Valtteri. He says, don't worry, you got yourself a good team leader there in Valtteri. And look what happened with Alfa Romeo. Good in 22, completely fell through. It was like absolute travesty. Felt so bad for Bottas and Joe. you felt like they were really misrepresented. But with Carlos, I feel like he's got a good place. They're going to trust him. They will listen to him, like how they will listen to Alex. And Alex will get some good benchmarks. It's like he will benefit from this to some extent. And, well, he already has. And with Carlos, he is betting himself in. Because I recall 2013, Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes. Like, that W04 was not built for him. It was built with the minds of Nico Rosberg and Michael Schumacher in mind. It had no DNA of Hamilton in it because the deal to get him over there was done in October. So there was barely anything in it, but Lewis adapted. He adapted to that, and by the middle of the season, he won his first race with them. And I could easily see that happening with Carlos. Like, yeah, he did have some input in the 47, but not like it's not his baby. That will be the 48, alongside Alex. But over time, we are seeing him showing his pace in qualifying, and it's really bringing it up there where both Williams can get ahead of a Ferrari or two Ferraris.
Yeah, but
when was the last time you could say that?
What you're talking about now is chapter 3.
I know. Well, no, it's the present.
It's the future.
No, that's the present, mate.
2026 is the future.
No, but Emilia Romagna, what did Williams go and do? They outqualified both Ferraris. So that's the present, my friend.
Okay.
So, there you go.
I'll let you get away with that one then. But, one thing that I've noticed with Carlos Sainz is that he's always kind of underrated. He's never mentioned as one of the 5 or 6 best drivers on the grid, or in the past. And then in McLaren, he started performing really well. Finishing P5, finishing P6. He even got a podium, and he was complaining that the F1 never filmed him. The camera was never on him.
Oh yeah,
and then he scored his first podium, and guess what happened?
Oh yeah, no, he went up to the podium and no one was there anymore.
It was after the race, so he didn't get the actual podium.
Yeah, no, exactly. So there were just the photos that McLaren took themselves, on the empty podium. But no, that's the thing with Carlos. You feel like he's got a game plan, like he's got something going on, and that he's genuinely like, I don't want politics, I don't want drama here, because I've already been through that, and I genuinely want to have my stamp on Williams' history, much like how Alex has got his stamp on history on the team as well, because it's not that far away, because if Williams can score 33 more points, they'll have beaten the 2017 tally where they got 5th place in the constructors. Mm-hmm. And that will truly mean their dark days are over.
Yeah.
That is really the indicator that, Williams are back-ish. And Carlos was part of that.
Tomo, have you got anything to add to the Carlos Sainz story?
I guess, what kind of... actually, when I think about Carlos's career, obviously at the Toro Rosso, alongside Max, and then Kvyat. I mean, when Kvyat went back to Toro Rosso, he didn't perform. I looked, it was like when Kvyat returned to Toro Rosso, for those remaining races of that 2016 season, Carlos scored 44 points. Kvyat scored 4. So it wasn't even close. But, Toro Rosso versus Max. Max was the more impressive of the two, obviously at Toro Rosso. And then Renault, obviously alongside Hulkenberg, it wasn't a particularly strong, spell for Carlos there. It certainly didn't elevate his stock. If anything, I remember at the time the calls were, it's the Sainz name that's getting in there, blah blah blah. That there wasn't a lot of confidence in Carlos at the time. And then at McLaren, he's alongside a rookie, and Norris. We know how good Norris is now, but at the time it was still like in the same way, I guess, in a way that like obviously Latifi and Sargent. Well, certainly Latifi, we knew he's a paid driver, right? But Sargent, very unknown, very unproven. And when Albon's destroying Sargent, or when Carlos is he's outscoring Lando at McLaren, but not massively. There's not a huge delta between the two. Until he got into that Ferrari seat, I don't think we'd really seen. You couldn't say for sure how good Carlos was, I don't think. And now, during that 4 years at Ferrari, all right, we know Carlos is different gravy, like how close he can get to Charles and how good Charles is. And I think now we're seeing that from Alex. So I do think there are actually some similarities there in their kind of career arcs to a point. Less troughs for Carlos, but certainly a similar level of, unknown teammates and not really knowing where to rate him until he goes against a class act like Charles and for Alex like Carlos?
I think the main thing that really makes Carlos stand out is his dynamic with teams. And he is a serious operator, not just a smooth one, in that he helps lift the team. He's not one for drama. And I still remember that when, Charles says effectively, I'm going to miss you. Like, that's, he laments. He's still, he'll remember his time with Carlos fondly. And yeah, they did have a couple of ding-dong battles, like Spain last year, Monza 23, no risk, all that stuff. But they kept it civil. They kept it never got explosive. It never got like you felt like something was about to explode. Like this year, everyone's thinking, oh, could something explode at Ferrari? Like something's about to happen. Like, come on, you got the two most influential social media giants at the same team. Like Charles and Lewis, right up there in terms of socials. But you never got that feeling with Carlos. Like, sure, they were actually a lot closer than anybody expected, but they still had that dynamic. Like they got on well, and and this was a Ferrari, which is known for team drama. And really, comparatively, Carlos's nature meant that it didn't really happen, save for isolated incidents. The only argument that I could say that people had with Ferrari is that Carlos did exhibit a lot of self-interest, as in the Silverstone win, the Singapore win, going against what Ferrari said. And I remember there was criticism saying, well, he's not a real Ferrari driver now, is he? He's not thinking about the greater whole. He's just thinking about himself. So there were some calls about him just not being a true member of Ferrari. He's just thinking about his own career, which understandably would be the case because you're going up against the Golden Boy. You want to show that you can go toe-to-toe with the guy, which he did. And, the amounts of seasons that he had together with him proved that, he's got a ringing endorsement from Charles. And with Alex, it means that Alex can easily benefit and has benefited from this because he's got so many more reference points. So, Carlos, he can bring so much to a team. Not just the leadership qualities, not just the wins he got at Ferrari, but just tightening up bootstraps and telling people, stop doing it like that. You got to do it this way. As in, he's got a plan. Because, Melbourne, for example, he was partly orchestrating Alex's, solid points haul at the first race. Because after spinning out in his first race, he could have easily just sulked and gone to his room. No, he stuck with it with the crew, put on a set of pair of cans, and he ultimately was able to help read what was going on based on his own experience and help Alex get those points to really kick Williams off. I mean, at that first race, people thought it was a fluke, but then what we saw really quickly is that it wasn't a fluke. No, and Carlos had some way to help G Alex up in a way.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're done with the flex. The next chapter is the shade. And this is where we give the content creator the opportunity to put some shade on the other driver. And since Law, you had the last bit of the podcast, so Tomo, you can go and talk about what qualities Carlos Sainz might be missing to be one of the greats.
Okay, so this is an interesting point because up until fairly recently, I felt differently about this, but then I was corrected because Carlos Sainz is one of those drivers where I always thought he was really good in the wet. I did. His dad's rally pedigree, but actually, you look at his record over fairly recent years. I think Brazil put it in the wall in the wet. There's a few too many examples of Carlos losing it in those tricky conditions compared to others. Definitely over recent years now, the best drivers can get caught out in the wet. I don't think just over a more recent case study, he's not the driver I'd jump to at all in terms of keeping it clean in the wet. You look at how Max is just able to be, and maybe that's an unfair example because Max is just insane in the wet. But yeah, I think a few too many times Carlos has come unstuck in the wet. Also, yeah, look, you kind of mentioned, you alluded to it, Law, his self-interest, which I think can be a double-edged sword. I think in their current position, it's probably more of a strength than anything, but it is certainly, if Williams are able to mount title charges in, I think Alex has said maybe 26 would be very, it may be a bit premature, but 27 onwards, does Carlos's, there are times to play the team game, there's times to not. And I do wonder whether, especially given, Carlos is 30 years of age now, he's in the prime of his career. He will not feel that, I'm sure, even if you're a young driver, you get your first championship opportunity, you're going to go for it. But I think with all the wisdom, the experience that Carlos has, I think that could maybe be a bit of an Achilles heel in terms of decision making, because you think, self-interest to a point is great, but then can that potentially lead to insecurity? Can that potentially lead to other things down the line? So I worry about that somewhat with Carlos, more so in the future. Again, I think right now it serves a purpose to Williams, but going forward, that could be an issue. I mean, he's a big endorser of the Madrid, which if that circuit ends up being an absolute stinker, lads, we know who to blame. I think he's doing a show run in a Williams car at some point in the upcoming
quite frankly,
months.
I'll go to it. I'll go to it because because the commute is dead easy. I'm not that far from I'm not that far from Gatwick, and then it's 5 minutes from the Madrid airport. I literally can just go. I'll just go down. I'll just drive down to Gatwick, hop on a plane, get to Madrid, and I can see probably the track right there. Cool. I'll go home now. So why not?
Look, I mean, yeah. Look, maybe it's a pro for you, Law. But if the circuit stinks, then
I just wish they picked the right footage. Like they picked that sim driver who just like completely got squirrely over the chicane. I mean, well, surely there were better takes.
It wasn't even it can't have been a sim driver. It must have just been someone they just got walking down the high street. Excuse me, mate. Do you want to jump on the Madrid? Yeah, of course. Why not? Never driven a car in my life. In terms of Carlos, look, I do think he is it is hard to find weaknesses in Carlos's game, because I would say that, does he have the absolute peak, like the absolute peak speed, pace? Probably not. Does he have the absolute peak consistency? Probably not. He's very good in a lot of different ways. And as much as, yes, he did get close to Charles Leclerc, can he be the driver to, say down the line, Williams, I don't know, bring a prime Kimi Antonelli in or something like that? Does he have the peaks to really deliver a world title? Maybe. It's still not. I don't think you can say for sure. He is quite an emotional driver. He wears his heart on his sleeve. Like, I'm picking at straws here, I'll be honest, lads, but no one's perfect.
Do you think he's a clean driver? Because he's had a fair few crashes and contacts, even this season, with Yuki Tsunoda a couple of times, and then there was the big crash in Azerbaijan with Checo, and I think every season that there's a few perhaps unnecessary crashes.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps I would. For me, I don't. When I obviously look at each incident, I know obviously Miami, when he tried to send up the inside of Lewis in the final corner, which is it's kind of worth a go. I've not come away. I don't know how you two feel. I've not come away from those, because I agree he's been caught up in quite a bit. Him and Oscar always scrapping last year as well. I've not come away with the sense that he is crashy. I think most of the time it's either 50-50 or not on him. Sometimes it is on him, but I've not got that impression. But I know, Win, do you feel like that is something?
Well, you're right that a lot of these cases are 50-50, but then I don't think you come into a 50-50 situation if you're overtaking or your defending is very confident and straight to the point.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And if your defending leaves a little bit open, or your attacking leaves a little bit open, then you get into the messy situations. And I think that Carlos Sainz has been in quite a few where you say, "Oh, that's unfortunate," but it could have been prevented.
Yeah, I mean, there are. I wouldn't lie with that because there have been moments where, as the Lollipop Man comics have made very clear, as in he is very much, says that guy crashed into me, and therefore you should get a penalty. And it's just like, he's very litigious. Let's just say that, as in like he's very much on the radio, and he's just very aware about what's going on. I still can't believe that Oscar and Carlos, such the most random rivalry that they had ever since Spa 23. And it was just like, what? Okay. That's a weird rivalry to have, I guess. Just like two of my favorite drivers coming together, and Miami, man. That was
it is hard to it is hard to draw, is this correlation causation? And maybe he's leaving a bit too much margin in there. I don't, again, when I think of drivers that, overtaking wise are exceptional, I don't go to Carlos. I go to I think Charles' racecraft is unbelievable. Obviously, Max he's prepared to walk over the line, but he can also he's unbelievable, like wheel to wheel. I think, I'm not sure if I've seen. I think that's a fair critique, but I wouldn't say I'm fully like, oh no, he definitely can't. He can't defend, he can't overtake, and he gets. I do think more often than not, I think he's not the overly guilty party. But you're right, there's no smoke without fire, I guess.
Mm.
So, are you done with his downsides, or?
Yeah, I mean, he's just
hard.
a really good looking. He's a good looking bloke, and I resent it. I'm just very bitter and jealous.
God, that hair!
Yeah, he's got a nice head of hair.
Well, now you see him back with an English team. He's now looking like he just came off the set of Kingsman or something like that.
Yeah,
with his dad.
Him and George would be back at Williams.
Well, no, technically they're members. They're both directors of the GPDA. Get them in suits and then basically say, "Blimey, Mr. Sulliam, you got a lot of business to attend to." Aye. Get ready, George. It's okay.
Stop inventing.
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. But yeah. In any case, if that's the case, I'll move on to Alex. And
yes,
2 words: Franco Colapinto. That was. I'm not gonna lie. I was very much aware of that situation, and after arguably the against the GOAT and then against Logan, Alex did have it very easy. And there were questions about, like, are we sure Alex is legit? Because he's not really even tested. Like, he was never out-qualified, not even close. I mean, the closest that it might have gotten was Vegas 23, when it was the Williams 6th and 7th. But then the safety car, they completely bungled their strategies. Something which I think they still have an issue with today. Because it's like, Albon on the radio just going like, what's going on here? Make up your mind. As in, like, Williams are a bit like, we don't know what to do. As in, like, would they just
which is surprising because James Vowles was a legend at Mercedes.
The strategist, absolutely. But I feel like they can't rely on him for everything, so they've really got to work this out. So hey, maybe if things don't work out, maybe like put in a vote for.
To be fair to Logan, he should have outqualified Alex in Saudi last year, but he went over that stupid white line in the middle, and that took away his time.
Yeah.
But that's the only one. Like,
that was unfortunate. But seriously, Vegas was I felt so bad for both of them. They qualified so well. Logan as well off the back of Austin, like. Sure, it might have been considered a pity point because of all the disqualifications, but it was a point nonetheless. But with Albon, it was a case of like people were like, it's all very well and good. He's got a place to go, and Williams don't want to get rid of him. But he's a nice guy, but does he really have the chops? And then when Franco came in and got those points and out-qualified Albon, really giving him a spook, finishing behind him in points, Singapore, I recall Franco getting such a blinder of a start right behind Checo, getting his respect, whereas Liam couldn't. As in, like, Liam, that's how you make friends. Sorry if I keep digging on about that, but, Lawson shouldn't have said it. But the fact is, though, is that Colapinto gave him a real spook. And there were calls about, is Alex Albon a fraud? And then Tomo, considering he's your boy, you'd be very much aware of that time in Formula One last year. You had to go through a very rough patch of people going, Franco's proving Alex is washed.
Oh, I remember it very, very clearly, Law. Yeah, I mean, look, I did actually do the number. So Colapinto was within a tenth of Alex over those in terms of qualifying delta, which is far too close. And like I said about, Lando and Carlos earlier when they were teammates at McLaren, when you've got a rookie jumping in alongside, especially at very short moments notice, I think that was the kick up the arse that Alex needed, to be honest.
That definitely helped him. I will agree. But during those months, it was very, very tricky.
But
and
I think, Colapinto coming in as a rookie, completely unburdened by any previous knowledge, that's the sort of rookie confidence. And that lasted, it didn't last all his races.
No, but because suddenly, unfortunately, he became a victim of his own success. For the longest time, people keep assuming that Franco's a pay driver. He's not. And I know this video is not about Colapinto, but it is very much valid in the story of his journey with Williams. And that, it only was recently he got that sponsorship money. Williams got some of that. He got lots of attention. And therefore, the world suddenly knew his name. And he was thrust into the limelight. I mean, when you listen to him speaking his native Spanish, he's very suave and he's got a lot of charisma. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, Franco, you're vapor sometimes. Jeez, you're only 21. And but in English, he's just very nervous. He's timid and he's bashful. He's very cute sometimes. Whenever you just see all the fangirls there, he's just like, oh gosh, oh no. It's endearing. But he felt like at the same time though he was getting ahead of himself. And he put a lot of pressure on himself, even though it was a 9-race stint where there were no attachments at the end of it, because he wasn't going to see a Williams. He wasn't. So there was no pressure. He wasn't going to lose his seat. He was just filling in for Logan.
Yeah.
But with that whole thing with Albon, though, it's just it must have been in the back of his mind going, oh, no, this is not good for my image.
Yeah, but
this is not great. And then Carlos is coming in next year and thinking, oh, God, it could be even worse because look what he does in Mexico. That was a triumphant win and just so much expectation. Thankfully, though, he has done enough to be able to kick on and prove the doubters wrong. But, oh yeah, Wim, you were about to say something?
Yeah, no, I was going to say that, Alex Albon, that season last year, he was probably trying to develop the car and every upgrade was, every upgrade had a little side note of what he needed to pay attention to. And, we do this because it'll improve this. And we do this because it'll improve that.
That got
and he's got all that
bills
stacked up on top of his performance.
And broken chassis.
And then Colapinto comes in and he's got nothing. He just has to drive the car fast.
Yeah.
And that's probably why he was so close to Albon.
That youthful young blood would have definitely helped.
Well, because haven't we seen? I remember, was it Tsunoda and Joe both scored points on debut?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they both did.
Yep.
Like, there is something I think to be said for, and I know that was Bahrain, so they had pre-season there, but there is something. Yeah, I do think that lack of burden, and I'm sure Franco kind of, well, he knew quite quickly that he was going to get a lot of support, both from a fan base and both fans and commercially, which was always going to kind of stand in his favour. But yeah, I mean, it was a test that I think Alex needed, and yeah, I think in the totality of it, I think because it started so strong for Franco, I think people forget that actually Alex was still the stronger driver over the course of the 9 Grand Prix. But when someone's jumping in so late on, it's never a good look, is it? When a rookie jumps in alongside an established driver, it's same as when Alex jumped in alongside Kvyat at Toro Rosso and was so close to him. There's a reason they gave Alex the opportunity in that Red Bull in 29 and not Kvyat.
No, that's perfectly reasonable. And thankfully, he has been able to step up. But going back to those Red Bull days, I recall that, unfortunately, he did memify himself by just having the whole, they rushed me so hard. And basically, it was right off the back of Gasly.
That was the Eiffel GP, wasn't it?
Yeah. And, it was like, sure, that was not too far off of his first podium at Mugello, which easily could have been his second podium or third podium had things gone differently. But the fact of the matter is, though, is that Albon, he unfortunately, even though he did have good skill, like he was on pace, like without a doubt, better than Gasly in that Red Bull car, it still wasn't enough. And I felt like his niceness was his undoing, that he just didn't fit, that he probably didn't fight his corner enough in trying to keep that seat, to fend off the likes of Checo's team. And, Christian would be just like Alan Sugar, just saying, why shouldn't I fire you? What can you offer that Sergio can't? And he managed to get a fairly good compromise, but I just remember that the focus is on him, especially since he and Pierre were setting the trend of the cutthroat department of Red Bull in the modern era, Kvyat being the trailblazer, because people were looking, well, Alex replaced Pierre because he wasn't doing it, and then we're seeing Alex is not doing well enough, so what's going on here? Is this the driver or is it the car? Back then, it wasn't so certain. But the fact is, though, is that Alex just was like, he wasn't cutthroat enough. And fortunately, at Williams, it doesn't matter, because through the iterations that he had under Jost Capito and then the likes of James Vowles, being nice, quite frankly, that's part of the ethos of Williams. It works. But I just feel like that at the same time, he's not going to take this lying down, because that relative passiveness is what saw his undoing at Red Bull, which does give me concerns that in the present, that this performance that he's got could bolster him to the point where you might get some rumblings with Carlos. It's just his past, his history in the sport. It has a lot of question marks over it.
Well, he took the seat from Gasly because Gasly had a big row with Adrian Newey in the garage. So
that did not help either. That did not help either.
He was probably thinking, "Oh, I better not, kick up a fuss because that doesn't work." Totally and then there's another thing, because I looked this up. What happened in the Eiffel GP? Like, Max was already the number one driver, and if Max, due to certain circumstances, was behind one of the Toro Rosso cars, then they would let him past, like, very easily. It happened so many times. It even happened later on that the two AlphaTauri cars were in front of Max. I think it was Spa, and they both had to start from the pit lane. Coincidentally. That's how Red Bull looked after Max. Nobody would, in their right mind, would fight Max in the sister team. But that didn't go for Alex, because both the drivers were fighting Alex very hard when he was trying to get the best result possible for Red Bull.
Because it makes sense why they'd do that as well, wouldn't it? Because they want that Red Bull seat.
Yeah,
if you're in Toro Rosso, you want the Red Bull seat.
Yeah, and then not to mention you got Yuki Tsunoda about to come in 2021 because the Honda relationship. And something I really realized is that actually, in terms of their junior careers, Tsunoda is more of a Red Bull driver than Max Verstappen, which is actually quite shocking. Like, Tsunoda was part of the Red Bull junior team for 2019 and 20. Max was only part of it for like 5 months formally. So you just realize, you look at that stat and go like, wow, Yuki's more of a Red Bull driver in a way than Max was at the start of his career, which is still, I find, quite balmy. But with Alex, I just feel like, as you say, that it was all unfortunate. But I think, that after the shock of Gasly and being so, what's the word? A lot of friction at that team, Alex came in at the right time. His good nature was probably a very refreshing change of pace. But unfortunately, it was just not enough for him to be just that gutsy to try and fight his corner, and he just ultimately capitulated, reserve driver role, and then the DTM stint, and then Christian helping him out later on to get the Williams gig. So it would work out for him in the longer term, but it did mean that he took a year out, and then that did start the question marks as, was he really that good? Or, is the Williams thing, poor Alex, he's doomed to the back. Especially, I mean, there was a bit of a false dawn with Williams in 21, but then, as soon as Latifi's brakes caught fire in Bahrain, I was like, oh no, okay, never mind. Okay, that's not great. And then 6 points in that entire year. Oof, ouch. So not a great time for Alex during that moment. And again, it just brought up that moment of like, is he really all that good? Yeah, because he had no one to really stack up against. But now basically you just wonder about what's going to happen now with this new Alex approaching approaching 30. Is he going to be the nice guy anymore? Is he going to start to, really, up his game? Is he really going to fight his corner? Because he's not going to want to have Carlos go up against him, who's another guy who also dealt with Verstappen. They ideally want to like pool their resources and go like, hey, we were both burnt by Max. Let's not try and burn each other. But then you're not sure. There are lingering doubts.
Yeah, well, there was a bit of a moment in Miami, wasn't there, where Carlos was told to hold position, and then Albon passed him anyway, or
well, it
something
sounded
like
there was they were telling Carlos something, and then Alex had already been told something, and then Alex overtook him, and Carlos was like, "What the hell? What?"
Well, I think Carlos was told first, and then when they told Alex, he was already
he was
had the
halfway
DRS
through
open,
the
was
move,
already making the move. So it was like, well, and plus Carlos had damage anyway. So
yeah, no, he got because basically Lando was scrapping with Max, and then pushed Carlos into Alex, and then that damaged his floor. So he was already compromised. So it was like, ugh.
They would have swapped him anyway. Yeah,
they would have done. But fortunately, what saved Williams' bacon that weekend was what was going on over with Ferrari. Yeah, that Williams, they dealt with the issue immediately, and James was like, right, we're going to solve this immediately. You're right. This shouldn't have happened. Carlos was sorry. Alex, we've really got to figure out, we can find some means to get better communication, which they then implemented for Imola. Whereas Fred Vasseur and Ferrari, they were just like, oh, well, we don't really see the problem. It's your fault, the media, for making a multi-available team. And you just felt with Vasseur, he's very defensive at the moment and just saying, oh, there's nothing wrong at all. And you're just talking a lot of the cow excrement. And but that's the thing. Ferrari's awkwardness throughout that entire Grand Prix was juxtaposed with Williams, and Williams came out of it stronger. And that's why you see so many people comparing Williams to Ferrari at the moment, because these two legacy teams are going through a moment of transition, and there could be a moment when they're just kind of intersecting, especially if they nail next year. Yeah, Williams could be back to the 2000s.
Well, that gives me a good opportunity to go to the next chapter, because that one is called The Future. We'll have a nice discussion now about the rest of the season at Williams. Who's going to come out on top? How hard will they fight each other? Are they going to crash into each other at some point? Will there be team orders? And even for the longer term, are they both going to stay at Williams?
Well, I have a theory about that. You don't mind me starting, Tomo, because I think this is a good plan.
Go for it.
Especially it's to do with Colapinto again, because I feel like the move that James did was a masterstroke in capitalizing on Flavio's going, I want that Argentinian kid. He's like a Michael Schumacher and Fernando Alonso. And it's like he's like, James is like, how much do you want for him? About 15 million. Okay, there you go. 15 mil. You can have Franco. Boom. He can use, admittedly, even though Alpine's a bit of a shambles at the moment, their TPC department is actually pretty solid. As in, they do have the facilities with their old cars, and the testing team is actually quite legit. So, say what you will about the Alpine Academy and not giving opportunities, but, Franco's got nowhere to go, really. He's already peaked. He can't really stay with the Williams Academy. Victor Martin now coming in, and I think that was an absolute boon for Williams. But then you just get the situation where I feel like in the future, I don't see Carlos and Alex being together for like many, many, many years. I see potentially by 2027, we could hear rumblings of one of them leaving. Rumblings. And by 2028, when Max leaves, if Red Bull can pull their socks up, one of them might want to step in to become the new leader of Red Bull. For a couple of years, if Red Bull are competitive again throughout the entire transition.
Say what you 2.5 year crystal ball outlaw. Yeah. This is 2028 predictions. Jesus.
Potentially. But I'd say for the next couple of years, they'll both want to bring Williams back up to good form and be part of that story, because it's a really legendary one. To see Williams back in the fight, it was like how McLaren's back in the fight. And Ferrari last year were back in the fight. And it's my own personal belief, even though I'm a McLaren fan, had Ferrari not had that slump between Spain and Hungary, they'd have gotten the constructors. They would have done. That Piastri would have, still been really good, but still not quite the mustard against Carlos and Charles. It was that developmental slump that saved McLaren's constructors' bacon, quite frankly. And I'm not ashamed to admit that. But I would say that the next couple of years, they'll play ball. They'll work together. James will definitely make sure that there is no discontent. Because remember, the many times we heard, Valtteri, it's James, as in he He knew how to keep Bottas in control when he felt feisty. And, Valtteri capitulated and complied. And I feel like both Carlos and Alex will tolerate it, but you will get a situation where you get Barrichello and Button in Brawn. They start off banding together to bring the team back to some sort of prominence, what was Honda. And then the moment you got Rubens going the blah, blah, blahing and all that stuff, you feel, oh, we've got ourselves some discontented people, trouble in paradise. That could easily happen. Like if Alex is not happy with Carlos has said, or if Carlos just goes, I don't know what Alex is doing, guys. It's just like if you get a moment where they start running off on each other in the media, and James having to put out fires, or as I suggested, like with Alex's manager talking about, oh, contracts are only worth the piece of paper it's been written on. Oh, things could easily change. As in, like, Alex is probably going to ask for more money because at the moment his contract's like gone up from 3 mil to 8 mil. Carlos's is at 10. And what we learned from McLaren is that both Oscar and Lando's contracts are the same. And I know it's money. They got oodles of cash. But it's a status symbol. It's a little pin to say, I earn the same amount as my teammate, so I know it's definitely equal. Because as Lewis said, cash is king. But there is that discrepancy between the two of them. And I would say that if Alex is going to stay and he wants to make the most of it, they are going to have to make sure that there is definitely parity in the financial department.
Okay. Good. Tomo, did you want to say something? Or, do you think Albon is going to keep scoring more points than Carlos this season?
No, I think Carlos has been ultimately unlucky. I expected things to start in Alex's favour. Like literally my preseason prediction was they will be the closest teammate pairing in F1. It will start with a bit of an Alex advantage. It will probably end with maybe a slight Carlos advantage because I do think he's ultimately the driver with the higher ceiling because we've seen more. We've seen him win races. We've seen him get pole positions. We haven't seen that from Alex, right? So there's more evidence to suggest that Carlos has the higher potential. But obviously Alex isn't the driver he was in 2019, 2020, 21. If we're going to look, there's a reason I predicted Piastri to finish ahead of Norris this season is because you see the potential, you see, okay, you assume learning, you assume growth and development. And I think Alex has developed and progressed and moved forward. And we know Carlos Sainz is a top driver. So that points gap doesn't tell anywhere near the full story. Carlos is right there with Alex, has been for the last few weekends. So, I think Carlos was expecting 5-6 races to get fully settled in. And I feel like he's as settled in for a driver with his experience, his Spanish brain, which just seems to add extra IQ when you're Spanish, essentially. I think he's got up to speed pretty quickly. And for the rest of the season, I see it being, nip and tuck between the two of them. Again, it's the smallest average qualifying delta. 0.085 so far over the 9 sessions we've had. Advantage Alex, but Alex had some big dubs on Carlos at the start, so it's basically as close as it gets now. So look, I think when we talk about team orders and them two clashing, look, the reason that would happen now is mainly ego, but also, if this team can be something special in 26 and 27, both drivers want to make sure that they're flying they're representing themselves to the best of their ability to not allow, I know Nico Rosberg's spoken about this before, like how he needed to make sure that the team didn't just favour Lewis and didn't just go with Lewis when he was winning in 2014 and 15. He needed to really fight his corner. Otherwise, the team's just going to take the easy option and go with because a 1-2 dynamic historically has always worked better. And that is the problem McLaren find for themselves at the moment, because I think it's great from an entertainment point of view. And you as a McLaren fan, Laura, I'm sure it's maybe a mixture for you because, it is a bit naive, I think. Like for them, well, it is. It definitely is.
As far
as
I'm
McLaren.
concerned, the whole thing at
But it's
Imola,
fun.
I know this is a bit of a tangent, but but this could be relevant to Williams in the future, especially if they get to where McLaren are right now. As far as I'm concerned, McLaren's just washed their hands of the whole thing, and they're just like, you know what, we don't. They know their team first. And I remember, I think my wife picked up on this after the race that Stella basically said, we didn't really see anything in the data that suggested Lando would be quicker than Oscar, or could actually get past and do max damage. So it was up to our situation that we would just let them figure it out for themselves.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they kept it clean, which is good for the optics of McLaren. They were quite passive, but they ultimately didn't get involved. So I think
and the
McLaren...
constructors is a wrap. There was no need to get involved in Suzuka. There's no need to get involved in Imola.
I mean,
the constructors is a wrap, Law. Come on, there's no way that's not going.
I do think the technical directors will bring Mercedes back into it, and I do think that eventually Red Bull could be fighting for P2. It really depends on how.
I think Lando and Oscar are too good to let that constructors slip. Surely.
I mean,
we'll be a third of the way into the season after Monaco. Surely.
I know, but I'm still.
You're trying to gas up everyone else.
I'm cautious. I'm cautious about.
You're a cautious
McLaren
fan. I understand that.
I'm like, I came in at 2015, the worst time to become a McLaren fan, and then I'm just like, I'm not used to this. Them being the dogs of F1, I'm not used to it.
Look, I just think with Alex and Carlos, right? You've got a driver lineup that both drivers are in the prime of their careers, and it's a lineup for the present and the near future, but not the long future. And I maybe agree. If we're talking 28, like down the line, maybe it splits up. But they've got two drivers who are, I think, quite clearly now firing on all their respective. Whatever you think of Alex and Carlos as individual drivers, within that team dynamic, it is clearly working right now. And if they can just give them a bit more performance, we've seen how McLaren were, they were nowhere at the start of 23 and look at where they are now. So I think they're onto a really good thing. And I think they've just got Alex and Carlos just seem very mature. Like, they're very switched on. I think it's in their mutual interest that they overall work together and iron out these creases. And if they're in a title fight, then all right, kind of gloves are off, but you need to make sure the foundations are in place, and Williams are still working to get there, because it's been so long since Williams have had two top drivers. I mean, Kubica wasn't at his full strength when he was there with Russell, and they were at the back of the field anyway. So
it's a good
big
question.
Learning curve for the
it's
team.
A good question to suggest. When was the last time? I would suggest it was Weber Heidfeld. That was the last time they had a legit lineup, like, proper at the top of their game.
It's a good question. It's been a long time.
Massa Bottas, I think, is good, but it wasn't like the best. But I would say Mark Webber and Nick Heidfeld, Quick Nick, that was a pretty good lineup for what they had,
Yeah,
but
they were like third in the constructors in 2014, weren't they? Bottas.
Yeah, they were, but that was because they were Mercedes powered.
Yeah, the power unit, yeah.
Yeah, of course they would be. But yeah, no, I feel like with Williams, those two, I think James will make it very clear, because one thing that has become an issue, and I think it's good that they found out now rather than next year when it really matters, is that they got seriously bad communication issues. Like, their miscommunication, we saw a lot of that last year, but this is a situation where Carlos is not going to tolerate this. And therefore, he will be putting the flames beneath the feet of Williams. And I think they will be receptive to it. And Alex will be like, I wish they would have done this under my tenure, but okay.
Both can
but if it benefits
from
me,
that.
Both of them will. But I mean, Alex will be like, I wish this happened under my watch. But oh well.
I think that's a part of that maybe gets underrated a bit, because everyone talks about drivers coming in and helping car development, but also there's team development. And I think,
absolutely.
Carlos is a really, both obviously have experience at Red Bull, but, just being very well trodden in their roles and the experience in the sport. Yeah, I think that is a big one.
Absolutely.
So
I feel like
we talked about
infrastructure.
The power unit of the Williams in 2014. Do you guys expect something like that in 2026?
I feel like it would help, but the aero department seems to be pretty good. Like, I mean, I think the Williams was like a speedboat, as in a bit lumbering in terms of the aero department, but it was a rocket down the straight. That's why Bottas still has the speed record from 2016 down the Mexican straight. So I feel like Mercedes are clearly in the pound seat when it comes to the power unit, and I think that will help them out a lot in terms of straight line speed. But I feel like what they're doing right now, they've got something good here. They've got a light chassis. They've got themselves an aero department, which seems quite legit. Their infrastructure is no longer relying on Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. They've got some good. They're testing things out, and so far it seems to be working already. I mean, there's 100 points for Williams this year. Is it doable? If Carlos comes online, then
definitely.
sure,
definitely.
Maybe. Like,
And there's a reason Alpine picked Mercedes to be their new power unit provider from next year onwards. Not just them dropping their own, because we always know they've got 20 horsepower, whatever it is, they're down. But they could have picked Honda, they could have picked Red Bull. They probably had options. They could have picked Ferrari, but they picked Mercedes for a reason. And we have nothing. We have nothing to go on as to where the competitive order is going to be. The only thing, I can't think of anything else, the only thing we have is Alpine made a conscious decision. And I mean, Alpine's decision-making has been very questionable over recent years, so maybe I won't take too much into this, but they chose Mercedes engines, and they must have chosen for a reason.
Yeah. I agree.
So you guys think that Williams might be P4, P3 next season, 2026, in the new regulations, or even better?
I would say battling for the top 3 is a decent shout with a cheeky win.
Look, I mean, we've all this say about, James Vowles, we don't care about, what is it, break everything. And then, Logan took that very literally by constantly breaking the car.
Alex did too, to be fair. Alex did too.
Okay, that is true. I was hoping you'd forget about that.
No. I've been running with that all year.
But so for all that talk, and you look at the progress already, where there's the DeRilton money, it's going to take time. It's going to James Vowles joined this team after Alex. Remember, Alex was a Jos Capito hire, so it's like he's not in the grand scheme of things, he's not been in there that long. And you look at the progress and the momentum, and you think, now obviously momentum potential is dangerous, because a team like McLaren, a team like Ferrari, potential momentum for years. It's only recently McLaren and Ferrari were still waiting, right? So I think that I don't see why I wouldn't have high expectations for Williams. We're seeing a very experienced, a very mature, 2 drivers in their prime. Pat Fry's had time now to get his feet under the table and really sort out that technical department. They've made a lot more hires than they have fires. And I mean, if you took the names away from these teams and just looked, as objectively as you can at who's in charge, who the drivers are, what their recent results over the years, I think you'd absolutely put Williams as a top 4, top 3 contender for 26.
But then,
I don't see why not.
One team needs to drop out, and then we've got
that's it. Yeah,
we've got Aston Martin as well with an Adrian Newey built car.
But then again,
you can't have 6 teams in the top 4.
Yeah, but then at the same time, you had the RB3 from Red Bull. That was Adrian Newey's first car for Red Bull, and that was, it wasn't that great. I mean, that is a very fair.
Are you doubting the GOAT law? How dare you?
Don't forget, it took a couple of years for him to get bedded in at Red Bull. It was 2009 when he kicked on. But I do feel like he is doing something. It's my own personal belief, based on that interview that he partook in, saying that he's had lunchtime chats with the AMR 25 team. He's probably saved them so much time and money.
He's there this weekend, isn't he?
Yeah,
he'll be in Monaco. But basically, he'll be right there. He'll be right there to just go, that's no good. Or like that. That's kind of cool. That would save them so much time. So I think a snifter of Newey came in with those Aston upgrades at Imola. Even if he just...
Little sprinkling.
He's got a world of experience. So if a team member says, I'm really struggling with the corner of the this and that.
He go, did you think of this?
And he goes, well, we had that when I was at IndyCar. Maybe you should try that direction. And that could help.
And even if it's just a different frame of mind, because he could easily just go, did you think of this? And they go, oh, I didn't think of that. And, he's just, I think that's the element there. And I feel like with Williams, they're all keen to kick on. And I feel like Aston could be good. It's just a case of them, Lance, there's that. Can he kick on? Yeah, he does have Gary Gannon. I rate Gary because he was mix engineer.
Yeah.
He does know a thing or two, and he and Lance seem to be getting on quite well. And that's very important to race engineer with their driver. That has been proven to be very dynamic. Case in point, when Bottas had a change of race engineer for Miami last year without him being told, and then he almost crashed into Oscar in practice. So it was like there were issues there. How Brian Bolsey arguably has given Leclerc a bit of a leg up, especially last year. But I just feel like with Williams, operationally, they need to update themselves. But they're making the mistakes now, which is better than next year.
The thing is, when you look at Grove, there's not those big infrastructure projects like we've had at Aston Martin as of late. I feel like Williams, I would say Aston have the higher ceiling than Williams, higher theoretical ceiling, because of they're going to have state of the art. Of course, there's more theoretical ceiling, but I feel like Williams, I back Williams to get closer to their ceiling quicker than Aston. I think Williams 26, 27 should definitely be more competitive than Aston Martin, and then maybe Aston Martin 28 onwards. That's the kind of way I'm seeing it right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you only look to this year, I don't think they were expecting to be this good already with just getting, Pat Fry's first car, them getting the weight down. I mean,
same chassis as last year.
I made a video before the season started saying that Carlos Sainz is going to have a bad year, and I had all these quotes from James Vowles saying that they weren't going to focus on 2025, and he literally said it's going to be a very hard year. So I expected them to be maybe P8, which would be a step up from the P9 they were last year, and then they've scored 51 points already.
Yeah. I mean, either that was the ultimate sandbag, something that he would have learned from Mercedes, or he just simply was he probably just underestimated it. Probably had no idea. I mean, that would make him so proud of his team. And just in this, I mean, I'm glad that they're not being tempted to kick back into development, that they're doing this all now, because they're doing this all now while Haas is not scoring anything, Alpine's not scoring anything, Aston not scoring anything, Racing Bulls bits and pieces, and now Haas is 31 points behind Williams, and they're now having to look more at Racing Bulls and Alpine and Aston Martin, because Aston's only 6 points behind them, and Stroll's the one with the points, and that's just weird. That's just weird to say.
It's interesting because it's like the point scoring system in F1 obviously only gives points to the top 10, and I feel like the car in 23, the Williams, was much more peaky in terms of you could have a Canada performance, you could have a Vegas where like the car's really quick, but then it was nowhere other place. And then last year it was a much more level car, but then you might be getting a lot of P12s, but that's still 0 points. You might be getting some P8s, P9s, but and it feels like the way that Alex has been able to get, but even like Carlos's pace has been good enough for a few weekends now to get into the top 10, absolutely, and he's got more unlucky than anything else. And it's like they've been able to. I don't think it's one thing. I probably think it's a combination of factors. And, the car's got slightly better. Carlos coming in has brought a lot of confidence. You can just, of course, right, this second seat has been a burden essentially to Williams for a very long time from a competitive point of view. And to now have someone who knows what they're doing, like in terms of racing IQ, he's up there with Max and Fernando essentially. And it's like to have that confidence in the team, Alex's, feedback, then making some, changes coming into the year, but they've not had any. I don't think they've had any major upgrades so far this season, right? Because they didn't have any changes in Imola, so it's almost like the Haas approach. I know it's not working for them great right now, but like they'd bring a car and then just focus on what they can, and because they're not going to put any resource into this year, they're just focusing all on 26. It's just optimizing what you already have and maximizing the potential, and that's exactly what they're maximizing the potential of what they already have underneath them, and they're still not maximizing it, but they're getting a hell of a lot closer than they were when they had Sargent and Latifi in the other car.
I think they said that in May they would stop developing any new parts, so I think they still had some in the can, like still being made.
Rollover,
So we'll still probably get one maybe decent package soon, and then that will be it from the stuff that's already being made. And then after that, James was like saying, using bodge jobs or something like sticky back plastic or something like that, just to kind of come up with things on the fly, as in go old school. But it's good. And I think Vowles was doing an interview saying that it's just better to know the car and fully optimize it, and essentially make the FW47 just a property of the trackside team, meaning everyone back in Grove can either be done to just make what's already been developed or work on next year's car. And I just feel like surely James learning from the school of Brawn, there's got to be something under the hood. Like, because Doralton is probably more than happy to invest because they've already made a killing on their investment. Like, I think it was like 200 million that they paid for Williams.
Mate, they've
Williams is they 5x their investment already, and they could now potentially be right up there and see that in grow even more. So they're not going anywhere. And actually, they've been quite a good investor in that Williams is still true to themselves, and Doralton shows no interest in changing that.
They didn't rip the identity out like they could have done. But Wim, I want to ask, right? So obviously, right now it feels like the trajectory, a lot of staff turnover at Red Bull. Max has not been overly happy. There's talk about performance clauses and that. Going forward, looking at where Max is now at Red Bull and Williams becoming maybe adding themselves to this kind of top 5, top 4 potential teams, how do you look upon Williams as maybe even a potential future home for Max? Maybe that's a stretch, but I don't know. I just feel like they're putting themselves. Max is a top driver. He's the best driver in the world. So if Williams can make themselves a top team, you have to then eventually be like, well, hang on a second, could that work?
Yeah. Well, my mood on Max leaving Red Bull changes with every performance. So he's just after an Imola win, so he's going to stay there forever. But if he finishes P7 in Monaco because the car can't ride curbs and it's slow in the slow corners and everything, then he's going to leave. He's going to go either to Mercedes because Toto wants him and hasn't signed George yet, or he's going to go to Aston Martin because his GT3 team has a Aston Martin car, I think, or he tested one, and Adrian Newey is there, and they can offer him $1 billion. And but I've never considered Williams because
I don't think James would take him.
I don't see them becoming a dominant team.
I just don't think James. I don't think James would tolerate him either because Max is a disruptor, and I don't think James wants a disruptor. I feel like also
there was that quote from James recently, wasn't it, about like the potential of Max replacing George, and James was quite kind of negative about it.
I think he meant that the car development will go into a certain direction where a number 2 driver can't keep up anymore because they can't handle that loose rear.
Yeah, and I don't think Toto would want that. He would want both cars firing on all cylinders.
It would be very bad for what do you call him, Antonelli, if Max would drive there.
Yeah, I mean, sure, Kimi has done the deed and overtaken Verstappen, in Bahrain, so he has done that. He could say, "It's just Mamma Mia." It's like there's a thing on social media where they ask the Mario Kart characters, and I play Mario, Mamma Mia, and I'm like, that's going in my bank. That's going in the archive. But yeah, I just don't see Max going to Williams. I just don't think it's a fit. I mean, even if they turn out to be good, I feel like by the time Williams are legit right up at the top, the regulations will be about to change again. And then Max probably wouldn't even be in F1. He'll probably be... I still can't believe it that Christian has been managed to spin that GT3 exercise into a plus, saying, look at us. We allowed Max Verstappen to go around the green hell in record time. Can you imagine any other team allowing him to do that? Seriously, he's managed to spin this into something to make Red Bull look good. To say we allowed him to do that. Can you imagine Aston Martin doing that? Because that's the green hell. Max could have easily spun off and crashed the car and hurt himself. Oh no, sorry, it's not Max, it's Franz. Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, Franz Hermann.
But yeah, no, I still find it would have been really perfect because if somebody accosted him, since Max speaks fluent German, he could be in character.
Yeah, true.
Just troll everyone and then just
isn't it just nice to see that iconic name Williams actually not in the doldrums, because it was like far too long that I know it's gone through ownership changes and it's maybe the fact that Claire and Frank obviously aren't involved with the team anymore, and it's kind of but it's still just nice to see that name somewhat competitive and right, you say dominant, like maybe Williams won't dominate into the next year. Hopefully no one does, and hopefully if any power unit is going to dominate, let's hope it's the Mercedes one, because at least you've got multiple teams running it rather than Honda being miles clear and then Aston Martin are just walking every race, right? Surely. So that hopefully bodes well for the Williams project.
I do rate Audi though. I do rate Audi quite well because I do because Binotto, look what he did at Ferrari. He was an engineer guy. and now he can be.
He was.
He can now
Yeah.
skulk off to the engine department and just do what he wants there. Come up with a brilliant Audi power unit, and Jonathan Wheatley can make it
But
happen because
you know who the man was who organized the hybrid engine for Mercedes?
Oh,
Andy Cowell.
yes, yes.
And
Yeah.
he's with Aston
You're
Martin
right, yeah.
now. So now
Mercedes
there's so many
HPP.
unknowns, and like
I mean, that will definitely
Red Bull
make it
hired
cool.
all the Honda engineers and 224 Mercedes engineers to work at the Red Bull powertrains. So they might come out of the blocks really well. Now there's so much unknown by 2026, but we can
That is going to
conclude
be good.
that Williams, the trajectory they're on with a great sponsor and a great team boss and two great drivers, they will keep on moving themselves up.
Yes.
I don't think we really have a conclusion on who's the better driver. Like Carlos Sainz is the better driver because he has more wins and more podiums, but still he's going to get beat by Alex Albon this season because I don't think he's going to overturn the 29 points.
No,
Alex Albon is ahead.
Alex got the good first step, but I feel like Carlos, if Carlos can convert those qualifying positions into actual points, and this Williams on the C6 tire is mega, like it's probably one of the better cars on the C6. So around Monaco,
Come on,
Monaco could
Albon
be
podium.
I think Monaco could be another double points finish for Williams, and a decent one at that.
Please.
And I feel like McLaren's probably going to walk it. I mean, I'm thinking Oscar's going to win it. Lando P4 probably.
Fernando Alonso will win. You heard it here first.
I do think he could get points.
I only put money on Max every race.
I feel like it's going to be a 1-2, but I feel like Max is not stupid. He's going to be like thinking Oscar's not going to, Oscar's not going to be limp-wristed again.
The two stops going to mix things up, I think.
Yeah,
this
is Hannah Smith's opportunity to shine.
I do feel Red Bull
Exactly
will have the edge in the pit stops themselves, even though Ferrari hold the pit stop record. I do feel like McLaren will be able to make better use of the C6 and actually use them at the start. Maybe if Lando doesn't qualify on the front row, he could then go long on the C5s. Split the strategy. Oscar scampers off on the C6. He can make use of them slightly more than Max.
He's already thought about this, isn't he, Wim?
Oh no, I had this in mind for my prediction video potentially. But I think with the Williams, considering they can get good on the C6 too, I would imagine they'll probably go on the softs and they'll be quite decent and hang in there. Maybe try and get some cheeky moves into the Nouvelle chicane, which arguably they really should have a DRS zone there.
I think Max is going to win because 2 years ago, Red Bull was really bad in Singapore. And last year, Max was, I think it was second in Singapore. So he went really well there. And the problem with the curbs and the slow corners, they've been working on it. And there have been improvements. So it's going to be pole and a win for Max.
I definitely think it could be front row easy for Max. I think second. I think Oscar will get the edge in qualifying just. And I think Oscar will also be like, because he'll remember what happened, because he was staring at the back of the win behind Leclerc for 60 laps. And I feel like he'll have learnt a fair thing or two from that time. So therefore, I think it is going to be a case of Oscar just goes straight in, heroics into Saint Devon, completely going against everything Jeff taught us.
Yeah. So, guys, I'm going to do the final thoughts thing again. The Matt Gallagher final thoughts. Tomo, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. I feel very vindicated, given how much stick I was given by saying that Alex was even going to be close to Carlos last year. So that's very nice for me. As a fan, I'm very proud and happy to see Alex grow and shine and show what he's capable of. Do I think he's the best driver in F1? Of course not. But he's proven that he does absolutely deserve to be here. And yeah, the trajectory is great. It's just really the career arc, the arc, as you often mention, Law, the redemption arc, I think absolutely is there. And look, is he the complete final package? Would he win world titles? Probably not. But he's gonna give a good account of himself for the rest of the season and hopefully for years to come. And alongside Carlos Sainz, that's a hell of a driver lineup. So well done, James Vowles, for making that one happen. Because, yeah, I mean, they sold Carlos a dream. And I tell you what, I'm sure I'm very happy. I'm very confident Carlos is glad he took that over the Sauber and the Alpine opportunities that were presented to him, because those two teams do not look like it. Williams does. So well done, Carlos.
Very nice. Law, final thoughts.
Final thoughts for me would be like, I feel like Williams are in a good place right now. There are clearly some major stumbling blocks that are needed to be fixed, and Carlos will be there with the relevant information from Ferrari to make sure that they don't happen, and that he will be honest and frank about it. He will tell them, I don't like that, change it. And then James will be like, yes, Master Carlos. And then Alex will then in turn benefit from all of that, because let's be real, his information is really kind of outdated, but he won't care because he'll get to benefit from it. He and Alex, Carlos and Alex, they really know each other quite well from the Red Bull days, and they have that connection. They don't want politics. They don't want drama. I do feel like it will happen anyway, because it always does. But you feel like if they were able to be together for at least 2 more seasons and keep it clean, I think they could bring Williams back to where we saw them in the early 2000s, where they were sometimes title contenders in the early days, but they would certainly be in contention for the odd win, or few wins, really, with the days of Montoya Schumacher. You had that. We could see that if they really nail the regulations. So, them gunning for the win, things could change, but right now they're in it together, and the Williams we'll see next year will benefit because of it.
Very good. Right. Well, chaps, thank you very much for taking time for this lovely podcast. I'll try to get it out as soon as possible. And your channels don't need any introduction. You can find Tomo on YouTube and Law VS on Law VS on YouTube. And if you're here from any of their channels, subscribe to my channel, please. Right, everybody. Take care now. Doei.
Doei. That was great.